Moving on.
話を進めて。
Moving on.
Moving on.
Moving on. Let's discuss the budget.
Moving on. Let's discuss the budget.
By the way.
ところで。
By the way.
By the way.
By the way, how's your mother doing?
By the way, how's your mother doing?
Speaking of which.
それといえば。
Speaking of which.
Speaking of which.
Speaking of which, where is John?
Speaking of which, where is John?
That reminds me.
それで思い出した。
That reminds me.
That reminds me.
That reminds me, I need to call him.
That reminds me, I need to call him.
On that note.
その件について。
On that note.
On that note.
On that note, let's take a break.
On that note, let's take a break.
While we're on the subject.
その話題が出たついでに。
While we're on the subject.
While we're on the subject.
While we're on the subject of money.
While we're on the subject of money.
Since we're talking about.
話が出たついでに。
Since we're talking about.
Since we're talking about.
Since we're talking about vacation plans.
Since we're talking about vacation plans.
As long as we're discussing.
議論しているついでに。
As long as we're discussing.
As long as we're discussing.
As long as we're discussing changes.
As long as we're discussing changes.
Now that you mention it.
そう言われてみれば。
Now that you mention it.
Now that you mention it.
Now that you mention it, I agree.
Now that you mention it, I agree.
Come to think of it.
考えてみると。
Come to think of it.
Come to think of it.
Come to think of it, you're right.
Come to think of it, you're right.
That brings up another point.
それで別の点が浮かぶ。
That brings up another point.
That brings up another point.
That brings up another point about safety.
That brings up another point about safety.
Which leads me to.
それで私は思う。
Which leads me to.
Which leads me to.
Which leads me to my next question.
Which leads me to my next question.
This brings me to.
これで私は思う。
This brings me to.
This brings me to.
This brings me to an important issue.
This brings me to an important issue.
Let me shift gears.
話を変えて。
Let me shift gears.
Let me shift gears.
Let me shift gears for a moment.
Let me shift gears for a moment.
Changing the subject.
話題を変えて。
Changing the subject.
Changing the subject.
Changing the subject. How's work?
Changing the subject. How's work?
On a different note.
別の話で。
On a different note.
On a different note.
On a different note, I saw Mary yesterday.
On a different note, I saw Mary yesterday.
In a related matter.
関連する件で。
In a related matter.
In a related matter.
In a related matter, we need funding.
In a related matter, we need funding.
On a similar topic.
似たような話題で。
On a similar topic.
On a similar topic.
On a similar topic, education is important.
On a similar topic, education is important.
Along those lines.
その線に沿って。
Along those lines.
Along those lines.
Along those lines, we should invest more.
Along those lines, we should invest more.
In that vein.
その流れで。
In that vein.
In that vein.
In that vein, let's discuss training.
In that vein, let's discuss training.
Switching topics.
話題を切り替えて。
Switching topics.
Switching topics.
Switching topics. What about dinner?
Switching topics. What about dinner?
Turning to.
話を向けて。
Turning to.
Turning to.
Turning to financial matters.
Turning to financial matters.
Moving to.
移って。
Moving to.
Moving to.
Moving to the next agenda item.
Moving to the next agenda item.
Getting back to.
話を戻して。
Getting back to.
Getting back to.
Getting back to our original discussion.
Getting back to our original discussion.
Returning to.
戻って。
Returning to.
Returning to.
Returning to what we discussed earlier.
Returning to what we discussed earlier.
Going back to.
戻って。
Going back to.
Going back to.
Going back to your first question.
Going back to your first question.
As I was saying.
先ほど言っていたように。
As I was saying.
As I was saying.
As I was saying before the interruption.
As I was saying before the interruption.
Where was I?
どこまで話したか。
Where was I?
Where was I?
Where was I? Oh yes, the meeting.
Where was I? Oh yes, the meeting.
Now where were we?
どこまで話していたか。
Now where were we?
Now where were we?
Now where were we before the phone rang?
Now where were we before the phone rang?
Let me pick up where I left off.
中断したところから続けて。
Let me pick up where I left off.
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 To continue.
続けて。
To continue.
To continue.
To continue with my explanation.
To continue with my explanation.
Continuing on.
続けて。
Continuing on.
Continuing on.
Continuing on, we need volunteers.
Continuing on, we need volunteers.
Before I forget.
忘れる前に。
Before I forget.
Before I forget.
Before I forget, call your dentist.
Before I forget, call your dentist.
While I remember.
覚えているうちに。
While I remember.
While I remember.
While I remember, here's your book.
While I remember, here's your book.
Oh, and another thing.
あ、それともう一つ。
Oh, and another thing.
Oh, and another thing.
Oh, and another thing, bring coffee.
Oh, and another thing, bring coffee.
One more thing.
もう一つ。
One more thing.
One more thing.
One more thing before we finish.
One more thing before we finish.
Also.
また。
Also.
Also.
Also, we need to discuss timing.
Also, we need to discuss timing.
Additionally.
さらに。
Additionally.
Additionally.
Additionally, there's the cost factor.
Additionally, there's the cost factor.
Furthermore.
さらに。
Furthermore.
Furthermore.
Furthermore, safety is a concern.
Furthermore, safety is a concern.
Moreover.
その上。
Moreover.
Moreover.
Moreover, we lack experience.
Moreover, we lack experience.
Besides.
その他に。
Besides.
Besides.
Besides, it's too expensive.
Besides, it's too expensive.
In addition.
加えて。
In addition.
In addition.
In addition, we need more staff.
In addition, we need more staff.
What's more?
その上。
What's more?
What's more?
What's more, it's dangerous.
What's more, it's dangerous.
On top of that.
その上。
On top of that.
On top of that.
On top of that, it's illegal.
On top of that, it's illegal.
Not to mention.
言うまでもなく。
Not to mention.
Not to mention.
Not to mention the time it takes.
Not to mention the time it takes.
Let alone.
ましてや。
Let alone.
Let alone.
I can't afford a car, let alone a house.
I can't afford a car, let alone a house.
Apart from that.
それは別として。
Apart from that.
Apart from that.
Apart from that, everything's fine.
Apart from that, everything's fine.
Aside from that.
それは脇に置いて。
Aside from that.
Aside from that.
Aside from that, I agree with you.
Aside from that, I agree with you.
Other than that.
それ以外は。
Other than that.
Other than that.
Other than that, no problems.
Other than that, no problems.
Anyway.
とにかく。
Anyway.
Anyway.
Anyway, what's your opinion?
Anyway, what's your opinion?
Anyhow.
とにかく。
Anyhow.
Anyhow.
Anyhow, we need to decide soon.
Anyhow, we need to decide soon.
In any case.
いずれにしても。
In any case.
In any case.
In any case, we're going ahead.
In any case, we're going ahead.
At any rate.
いずれにしても。
At any rate.
At any rate.
At any rate, thanks for coming.
At any rate, thanks for coming.
Either way.
どちらにしても。
Either way.
Either way.
Either way, we'll need help.
Either way, we'll need help.
Regardless.
とにかく。
Regardless.
Regardless.
Regardless, I support the plan.
Regardless, I support the plan.
Nevertheless.
それにもかかわらず。
Nevertheless.
Nevertheless.
Nevertheless, we should try.
Nevertheless, we should try.
However.
しかしながら。
However.
However.
However, there's one problem.
However, there's one problem.
But.
しかし。
But.
But.
But let's talk about something else.
But let's talk about something else.
Still.
それでも。
Still.
Still.
Still, I think we can succeed.
Still, I think we can succeed.
Yet.
それでも。
Yet.
Yet.
Yet there's hope for improvement.
Yet there's hope for improvement.
Even so.
それでも。
Even so.
Even so.
Even so, we must continue.
Even so, we must continue.
Be that as it may.
それはそうとして。
Be that as it may.
Be that as it may.
Be that as it may, let's move forward.
Be that as it may, let's move forward.
All the same.
それでも同じ。
All the same.
All the same.
All the same, I'm optimistic.
All the same, I'm optimistic.
That said.
とは言うものの。
That said.
That said.
That said, I have concerns.
That said, I have concerns.
Having said that.
そう入っても。
Having said that.
Having said that.
Having said that, I'll help you.
Having said that, I'll help you.
On the other hand.
一方では。
On the other hand.
On the other hand.
On the other hand, it could work.
On the other hand, it could work.
Then again.
またその一方で。
Then again.
Then again.
Then again, maybe I'm wrong.
Then again, maybe I'm wrong.
On the flip side.
裏を返せば。
On the flip side.
On the flip side.
On the flip side, it saves money.
On the flip side, it saves money.
Conversely.
逆に。
Conversely.
Conversely.
Conversely, it might be beneficial.
Conversely, it might be beneficial.
In contrast.
対照的に。
In contrast.
In contrast.
In contrast, the other option is cheaper.
In contrast, the other option is cheaper.
On the contrary.
それどころか。
On the contrary.
On the contrary.
On the contrary, I enjoyed it.
On the contrary, I enjoyed it.
Rather.
むしろ。
Rather.
Rather.
Rather, I think we should wait.
Rather, I think we should wait.
Instead.
代わりに。
Instead.
Instead.
Instead, let's try a different approach.
Instead, let's try a different approach.
Alternatively.
代わりとして。
Alternatively.
Alternatively.
Alternatively, we could postpone it.
Alternatively, we could postpone it.
Otherwise.
そうでなければ。
Otherwise.
Otherwise.
Otherwise, we'll miss the deadline.
Otherwise, we'll miss the deadline.
Or else.
そうでなければ。
Or else.
Or else.
Finish soon, or else we'll be late.
Finish soon, or else we'll be late.
If not.
そうでなければ。
If not.
If not.
Try this, if not, call me.
Try this. If not, call me.
Failing that.
それがダメなら。
Failing that.
Failing that.
Failing that, we'll use Plan B.
Failing that, we'll use Plan B.
As an alternative.
代替案として。
As an alternative.
As an alternative.
As an alternative, consider renting.
As an alternative, consider renting.
Meanwhile.
その間。
Meanwhile.
Meanwhile.
Meanwhile, let's prepare the documents.
Meanwhile, let's prepare the documents.
In the meantime.
その間に。
In the meantime.
In the meantime.
In the meantime, practice your speech.
In the meantime, practice your speech.
At the same time.
同時に。
At the same time.
At the same time.
At the same time, we must be careful.
At the same time, we must be careful.
Simultaneously.
同時に。
Simultaneously.
Simultaneously.
Simultaneously, check the other options.
Simultaneously, check the other options.
Concurrently.
同時に。
Concurrently.
Concurrently.
Concurrently, we're testing alternatives.
Concurrently, we're testing alternatives.
In parallel.
並行して。
In parallel.
In parallel.
In parallel, develop backup plans.
In parallel, develop backup plans.
Speaking of.
といえば。
Speaking of.
Speaking of.
Speaking of movies, have you seen the new one?
Speaking of movies, have you seen the new one?
Talking of.
の話をすると。
Talking of.
Talking of.
Talking of restaurants, I know a good one.
Talking of restaurants, I know a good one.
Mentioning.
について言えば、
Mentioning.
Mentioning.
Mentioning vacation. Where are you going?
Mentioning vacation, where are you going?
As for.
については、
As for.
As for.
As for the meeting, it's postponed.
As for the meeting, it's postponed.
Regarding.
に関して、
Regarding.
Regarding.
Regarding your question, here's my answer.
Regarding your question, here's my answer.
Concerning.
に関して、
Concerning.
Concerning.
Concerning the budget, we're over.
Concerning the budget, we're over.
With regard to.
に関して、
With regard to.
With regard to.
With regard to safety, we're compliant.
With regard to safety, we're compliant.
With respect to.
に関して、
With respect to.
With respect to.
With respect to timing, we're flexible.
With respect to timing, we're flexible.
In terms of.
の観点から、
In terms of.
In terms of.
In terms of cost, it's reasonable.
In terms of cost, it's reasonable.
When it comes to.
に関しては、
When it comes to.
When it comes to.
When it comes to quality, we're the best.
When it comes to quality, we're the best.
As far as.
に関する限り、
As far as.
As far as.
As far as I know, he's honest.
As far as I know, he's honest.
Incidentally.
ちなみに、
Incidentally.
Incidentally.
Incidentally, I saw your brother yesterday.
Incidentally, I saw your brother yesterday.
By chance.
偶然、
By chance.
By chance.
By chance, are you free tonight?
By chance, are you free tonight?
Coincidentally.
偶然にも、
Coincidentally.
Coincidentally.
Coincidentally, I was thinking the same.
Coincidentally, I was thinking the same.
Interestingly.
興味深いことに、
Interestingly.
Interestingly.
Interestingly, prices have dropped.
Interestingly, prices have dropped.
Surprisingly.
驚くことに、
Surprisingly.
Surprisingly.
Surprisingly, everyone agreed.
Surprisingly, everyone agreed.
Strangely.
奇妙なことに、
Strangely.
Strangely.
Strangely, he didn't show up.
Strangely, he didn't show up.
Oddly.
奇妙にも、
Oddly.
Oddly.
Oddly, the door was open.
Oddly, the door was open.
Curiously.
興味深いことに、
Curiously.
Curiously.
Curiously, she said nothing.
Curiously, she said nothing.
Remarkably.
注目すべきことに、
Remarkably.
Remarkably.
Remarkably, he finished early.
Remarkably, he finished early.
Notably.
特に、
Notably.
Notably.
Notably, sales increased dramatically.
Notably, sales increased dramatically.
Particularly.
特に、
Particularly.
Particularly.
Particularly interesting is the data.
Particularly interesting is the data.
Especially.
特に、
Especially.
Especially.
Especially important is timing.
Especially important is timing.
In particular.
特に、
In particular.
In particular.
In particular, watch the expenses.
In particular, watch the expenses.
For instance.
例えば、
For instance.
For instance.
For instance, consider yesterday's meeting.
For instance, consider yesterday's meeting.
For example.
例えば、
For example.
For example.
For example, look at these numbers.
For example, look at these numbers.
Take.
例を取ると、
Take.
Take.
Take John, for instance.
Take John, for instance.
Such as.
などの、
Such as.
Such as.
Cities such as New York are expensive.
Cities such as New York are expensive.
Like.
のような、
Like.
Like.
People like him are rare.
People like him are rare.
Including.
を含めて、
Including.
Including.
Everyone's invited, including children.
Everyone's invited, including children.
Namely.
すなわち、
Namely.
Namely.
3 came, namely Tom, Dick, and Harry.
3 came, namely Tom, Dick, and Harry.
Specifically.
具体的には、
Specifically.
Specifically.
Specifically, I need your signature.
Specifically, I need your signature.
To illustrate.
例示すると、
To illustrate.
To illustrate.
To illustrate my point, consider this.
To illustrate my point, consider this.
Case in point.
適切な例、
Case in point.
Case in point.
Case in point, yesterday's incident.
Case in point, yesterday's incident.
A good example.
良い例、
A good example.
A good example.
A good example is our success story.
A good example is our success story.
To demonstrate.
実証するために、
To demonstrate.
To demonstrate.
To demonstrate, let me show you.
To demonstrate, let me show you.
First.
第一に、
First.
First.
First, we need to plan carefully.
First, we need to plan carefully.
Second.
第二に、
Second.
Second.
Second, we must allocate resources.
Second, we must allocate resources.
Third.
第三に、
Third.
Third.
Third, we should set deadlines.
Third, we should set deadlines.
Next.
次に、
Next.
Next.
Next, let's discuss the timeline.
Next, let's discuss the timeline.
Then.
それから、
Then.
Then.
Then we'll review the results.
Then we'll review the results.
After that.
その後、
After that.
After that.
After that, we'll make adjustments.
After that, we'll make adjustments.
Following that.
それに続いて、
Following that.
Following that.
Following that, we'll test again.
Following that, we'll test again.
Subsequently.
その後、
Subsequently.
Subsequently.
Subsequently, we discovered the error.
Subsequently, we discovered the error.
Later.
後で、
Later.
Later.
Later, we'll address concerns.
Later, we'll address concerns.
Finally.
最後に、
Finally.
Finally.
Finally, let's vote on the proposal.
Finally, let's vote on the proposal.
Lastly.
最後に、
Lastly.
Lastly.
Lastly, I want to thank everyone.
Lastly, I want to thank everyone.
In conclusion.
結論として、
In conclusion.
In conclusion.
In conclusion, we should proceed.
In conclusion, we should proceed.
To conclude.
結論として、
To conclude.
To conclude.
To conclude, the plan is solid.
To conclude, the plan is solid.
Now.
さて、
Now.
Now.
Now, let's discuss the details.
Now, let's discuss the details.
Well.
さて、
Well.
Well.
Well, what do you think?
Well, what do you think?
So.
それで、
So.
So.
So, what's the next step?
So, what's the next step?
Okay.
OK、
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, let's move to the next item.
Okay, let's move to the next item.
Right.
そうですね、
Right.
Right.
Right, let's focus on solutions.
Right. Let's focus on solutions.
All right.
よろしい、
All right.
All right.
All right, let's begin the meeting.
All right. Let's begin the meeting.
Very well.
よろしい、
Very well.
Very well.
Very well, let's proceed.
Very well, let's proceed.
Good.
良い、
Good.
Good.
Good. Now about the budget.
Good. Now about the budget.
Fine.
結構、
Fine.
Fine.
Fine. Let's discuss alternatives.
Fine, let's discuss alternatives.
Fair enough.
なるほど、
Fair enough.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. But what about cost?
Fair enough. But what about cost?
I see.
なるほど、
I see.
I see.
I see. But there's another issue.
I see. But there's another issue.
Understood.
わかりました。
Understood.
Understood.
Understood. Now let's talk timing.
Understood. Now let's talk timing.
Got it.
わかった。
Got it.
Got it.
Got it. What's the next priority?
Got it. What's the next priority?
Makes sense.
理にかなう。
Makes sense.
Makes sense.
Makes sense. But consider this.
Makes sense. But consider this.
True.
そうですね。
True.
True.
True. However, we must be careful.
True. However, we must be careful.
Indeed.
確かに、
Indeed.
Indeed.
Indeed. That's a valid point.
Indeed. That's a valid point.
Absolutely.
絶対に、
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And here's why.
Absolutely. And here's why.
Exactly.
その通り、
Exactly.
Exactly.
Exactly. Which brings me to this.
Exactly. Which brings me to this.
Precisely.
正確に、
Precisely.
Precisely.
Precisely. So let's explore that.
Precisely. So let's explore that.
Right on.
その通り、
Right on.
Right on.
Right on. Now about implementation.
Right on. Now about implementation.
You bet.
もちろん、
You bet.
You bet.
You bet. And there's more.
You bet. And there's more.
No doubt.
間違いない。
No doubt.
No doubt.
No doubt. But consider the risks.
No doubt. But consider the risks.
For sure.
確かに、
For sure.
For sure.
For sure. Yet we need backup plans.
For sure. Yet we need backup plans.
Definitely.
間違いなく、
Definitely.
Definitely.
Definitely. Which leads to my question.
Definitely. Which leads to my question.
Certainly.
確かに、
Certainly.
Certainly.
Certainly. But what about timing?
Certainly. But what about timing?
Of course.
もちろん。
Of course.
Of course.
Of course, now let's discuss details.
Of course, now let's discuss details.
Naturally.
当然。
Naturally.
Naturally.
Naturally, which raises another point.
Naturally, which raises another point.
Obviously.
明らかに。
Obviously.
Obviously.
Obviously, so we must act quickly.
Obviously, so we must act quickly.
Clearly.
明らかに。
Clearly.
Clearly.
Clearly, but there are complications.
Clearly, but there are complications.
Evidently.
明らかに。
Evidently.
Evidently.
Evidently, this changes our approach.
Evidently, this changes our approach.
Apparently.
どうやら。
Apparently.
Apparently.
Apparently, we need more information.
Apparently, we need more information.
Seemingly.
一見したところ。
Seemingly.
Seemingly.
Seemingly, everything's under control.
Seemingly, everything's under control.
Presumably.
おそらく。
Presumably.
Presumably.
Presumably, you've considered alternatives.
Presumably, you've considered alternatives.
Supposedly.
思うに。
Supposedly.
Supposedly.
Supposedly, they'll arrive tomorrow.
Supposedly, they'll arrive tomorrow.
Allegedly.
伝えられるところでは。
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, there were problems.
Allegedly, there were problems.
Reportedly.
報告によると。
Reportedly.
Reportedly.
Reportedly, sales have improved.
Reportedly, sales have improved.
According to.
によると。
According to.
According to.
According to reports, we're succeeding.
According to reports, we're succeeding.
Based on.
に基づいて。
Based on.
Based on.
Based on data, we should continue.
Based on data, we should continue.
Judging by.
から判断すると。
Judging by.
Judging by.
Judging by results, it's working.
Judging by results, it's working.
Given that.
を考えると。
Given that.
Given that.
Given that information, let's proceed.
Given that information, let's proceed.
Considering.
を考慮すると。
Considering.
Considering.
Considering the circumstances, we're lucky.
Considering the circumstances, we're lucky.
Taking into account.
を考慮に入れて。
Taking into account.
Taking into account.
Taking into account all factors.
Taking into account all factors.
In light of.
を考慮して。
In light of.
In light of.
In light of recent events.
In light of recent events.
In view of.
を考慮して、
In view of.
In view of.
In view of the situation.
In view of the situation.
With this in mind.
これを念頭に置いて、
With this in mind.
With this in mind.
With this in mind, let's plan.
With this in mind, let's plan.
Bearing this in mind.
これを心に留めて、
Bearing this in mind.
Bearing this in mind.
Bearing this in mind, proceed carefully.
Bearing this in mind, proceed carefully.
Keeping this in mind.
これを心に留めて、
Keeping this in mind.
Keeping this in mind.
Keeping this in mind, what's next?
Keeping this in mind, what's next?
That being said.
とは言うものの、
That being said.
That being said.
That being said, we should try.
That being said, we should try.
This being the case.
そういうわけで、
This being the case.
This being the case.
This being the case, we'll adapt.
This being the case, we'll adapt.
Under the circumstances.
状況を考えると、
Under the circumstances.
Under the circumstances.
Under the circumstances, we did well.
Under the circumstances, we did well.
In that case.
その場合、
In that case.
In that case.
In that case, let's reconsider.
In that case, let's reconsider.
If so.
もしそうなら、
If so.
If so.
If so, we need a new strategy.
If so, we need a new strategy.
If that's the case.
それがそうなら、
If that's the case.
If that's the case.
If that's the case, count me in.
If that's the case, count me in.
Should that be true?
それが本当なら、
Should that be true?
Should that be true?
Should that be true, we're in trouble.
Should that be true, we're in trouble.
Assuming that's correct.
それが正しいと仮定して、
Assuming that's correct.
Assuming that's correct.
Assuming that's correct, what's next?
Assuming that's correct, what's next?
Supposing you're right.
君が正しいと仮定して、
Supposing you're right.
Supposing you're right.
Supposing you're right, then what?
Supposing you're right, then what?
Let's say.
仮に言うと、
Let's say.
Let's say.
Let's say you're correct about this.
Let's say you're correct about this.
What if?
もしも、
What if?
What if?
What if we tried a different approach?
What if we tried a different approach?
Imagine if.
もし想像すると、
Imagine if.
Imagine if.
Imagine if we had unlimited budget.
Imagine if we had unlimited budget.
Picture this.
これを想像して、
Picture this.
Picture this.
Picture this scenario for a moment.
Picture this scenario for a moment.
Consider this.
これを考えて。
Consider this.
Consider this.
Consider this alternative option.
Consider this alternative option.
Think about it.
考えてみて。
Think about it.
Think about it.
Think about it from their perspective.
Think about it from their perspective.